Hi, this is Anita with 5 Minutes with Art, where we like to be able to tell you in 5 minutes each week something about art. We love art and we love all periods of art. We feel like in order to really understand other countries, cultures, and places, it's really important to be able to understand a lot about their art. And one of the art movements, which is an art movement that you kind of, hear about some, but is not really talked about that much, is the Mannerism art movement. And one of the reasons is because the Mannerism art movement was a relatively short art movement, and it's sort of squeezed in between the High Renaissance and the Baroque art movement in the 16th century. So it's sort of in between these two better known art movements is this art movement called the Mannerism art movement. But the Mannerism art movement has some very specific characteristics about it and had some really great paintings. It was a very anti-classical or anti-Renaissance type of style of art. So it kind of was like many art movements that come over the ages or over time. It becomes where the art movement is maybe becomes anti-something. And this one was very anti-Renaissance style. There's kind of a lack of perspective and proportions in the Mannerism art movements. And the paintings were more artificial in style. And this could be one reason why it's maybe not as popular as some of the art movements, but it was kind of this art movement that was more artificial in its style. It did not look to nature for guidance. Like it really didn't see the need for nature. It didn't look to nature for guidance. They didn't care about nature. So, that also was a bit of a difference. In the Mannerism art movements, the artists were consumed what's known as veracity, which basically means great skill in music or another artistic pursuit. So they wanted to show and express their skill of art. So this is kind of a little bit like, showing off a bit about their art and what they could do. It had a lot of contrasting and enriched colors. So if you're really interested in this art movement, which is the Mannerism art movement, which has sort of like been squeezed between these two different art movements, it is very different than the Renaissance art movement itself, which also makes it an interesting art movement because it is, different than the Renaissance. And it was in rejection of the Renaissance, what art was like during the Renaissance period. The reason why this is important is because when you're looking at an art movement, it's really good to understand a bit of the history of why the movement became important. The political and the social events of the time, affected the art movement. During this time of Mannerism art was a time in history when there were significant changes, not only politically, but also religiously and economically for the people in Europe. Religion and the church had a lot of influence on the masses and the artist. Yet at this time, there was a rise in Protestantism. So, Protestantism was starting to take hold throughout Europe. And so the people began to see religion a bit differently than before. The Catholic Church that had always been very important to the arts, especially during the period of the Renaissance, was now, there's this battle going on between the Catholic Church and the Protestant Church. So the Protestant Reformation was happening, which was changing religion in Europe, including in places like Italy. So all of these, things, these political changes, in our world have a huge effect on art. So that's why one of the reasons why I love art so much is because art is not just about, you look at a painting, you say, is this a beautiful painting? Art really is about history. It's about what's happening during its time, because usually art is a reaction to something that's politically and socially changing in the world. And that is what really makes art so great. And that's why understanding art is so important and so significant. We will put the title to our blog, which is entitled, What Are the Characteristics of Mannerism Art? If you'd like to be able to learn more about the Mannerism art movement. And we have quite a few pictures up there, like, famous pictures of artists during this relatively short art movement and some of their paintings that they did, if you'd like to be able to also see them. We'd like to thank you so much for listening to us 5 minutes in art each week to learn a little bit about art, to understand a bit about art. We love art and we hope that you will love art with us. We'd like to thank you, our audience. We know without you it would not be possible. And we would also like to thank our team that helps put it together, especially Rico helps put this podcast together. Thank you all so much.